It's time for another edition of Around the Nest 2.0, where we go up, down, left, right, and all over the Blue Jays minor league system to talk prospect news, goings on around the circuit, and also, most importantly, where we can see the Jays 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 years from now. Tyler Zickel with the Vancouver Canadians joining you. Of course, we've got voices from all over the system: Gregg Caserta, AAA Buffalo, Tyler Murray from AA New Hampshire, and the one and only AT, Andrew Thriffiley from Low A Dunedin. Gentlemen, happy day. Let's get right to it on a Frisky Friday. We'll start at the top of the system. Triple G in AAA. Gregg Caserta, happy day, my friend. How are things going on the shores of the Delaware River?
Things are good. As you can see, I dressed up for today's podcast because I was very self-conscious about my Appetite for Destruction t-shirt last week. When I went back and listened to that, I was laughing about how you called me out about that right away. So 3 straight wins here against the Iron Pigs on this 12-game homestand. The game winner last night from Kevin Smith, which I'm sure we'll get into. And for the first time at game number 60, the Thunder Bisons, the Thundering Herd, are 12 games over for the first time this season. So all good there.
It has been a terrific stretch. And let's talk about Mr. Smith. He has certainly gone to the AAA Northeast and done his thing. I butchered that already, but you know what? In a season such as this, we're just going to take it as it comes. So for Kevin Smith, a guy who we've talked about a lot on the Nest over this season, he continues to produce, finds ways to come up big in big spots. We've talked about the power numbers, but also finding ways to get on base as well. And also a guy who used to use the orange stealth back in college. That's something him and I have in common. And the only thing we have in common when it comes to baseball. I'm a radio guy for more than one reason. So tell us about what Kevin's been doing so well and continuing to succeed at.
I think the best thing is that he continues to shine defensively. Obviously, you guys know him as a shortstop, but he's played some third base when they've asked him to. He's played left field for the first time in his career. He's actually in there tonight for the Friday night game against the Iron Pigs. And it hasn't really bled over because you've seen guys over the years, Zick, and you guys have all seen it, where they ask them to play out of position sometimes and they worry about it. You think about Scott Kingery with the Phillies, where he's a second baseman by trade, but they move him all over. And now because he's worrying about other positions, it affects the offense. And with Kevin, it really hasn't. I think right now, the one thing with Kevin Smith is that maybe he's starting to hear whispers about the trade deadline. I think that's the only thing that could be popping up right now for him. And maybe for a couple of days there it was, but he's homered in back-to-back games in this series. He had the home run in the first inning last night. He had the game-winning double in the 9th inning to win it. And he's amongst the league leaders in 7 or 8 different offensive categories. So he's been their leader. He's been the guy that's pounded the drum all year, and he continues to shine. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I want to dig in a little bit on that last comment about the trade deadline that you made, Gregg. And if I could have you put on your GM hat for a moment, if you're an opposing GM for a team outside the Blue Jays, are there any Buffalo Bisons that you might be targeting that you'd circle on a potential depth chart and say, we're going to try and go get that guy?
Yeah, Kevin's got to be a name that you think about. But I also think if you look at this team right now, they've had 4 different catchers at the major league level this year. So where does Riley Adams fit in? If you've got Reese McGuire, who's gone through his ups and downs this season, you've got Alejandro Kirk, you've got Danny Jansen, who the organization likes because of his defensive prowess. You've got a surplus of catching talent, which not a lot of teams have. So that's a possibility. You're starting to see this bullpen, especially deep, where guys have, like Bergen and Beasley, have both been DFA'd, but they've pitched in the majors this year. You've got Piamps, you've got Castro, you've got a lot of guys and only an X amount of spots. And this year, you're not getting the roster expansion to the full 40. So to me, the Blue Jays are in this position where they've got guys that they can trade. It's just a question of what they're looking for the stretch run and if it's going to help them in the short term, because you figure you've got most of your infield locked up. Simeon's going to be entering his age 30 to 31 season. He's on a 1-year deal. So you don't know what's happening with him in the future. So there are going to be decisions made by this organization. And I think it's going to be more than one trade that eventually happens here in these next couple of weeks.
Certainly some exciting times around baseball. Just had the Midsummer Classic, of course. Got to see some Blue Jays All-Stars do their thing. And thinking towards the postseason now as we reach the midseason mark for the Bisons tonight, Game 60. When you look towards what has recently been announced as this kind of last final stretch, if you will, how they're branding it through minor league baseball, what's been the vibe like around the Bison's clubhouse and around the Thunder front office now that the season's been extended and there's some other opportunities to make an impact in September?
Well, I think it all stems from the fact that nobody really has any control about what's going to happen as it pertains to the Blue Jays and when they return to Toronto. Basically, at this point, it's out of our hands. It's out of the Bison's front office's hands. And more importantly, it's out of Toronto's front office's hands. They've submitted their proposal. It all falls on the government now, which if you've been following along, Trudeau and his ministry there, they've been dragging their feet on a lot of stuff. And then you see things happen like yesterday with the Yankees-Red Sox postponement. Those are the types of things that the government's going to factor in. So they were hoping that July 30th would be the date. They were hoping that today would be the day where the government makes its decision as to whether they approve their proposal. And at the last I read, and it changes really hour by hour, the government's not going to be looking at it until next week. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm treating this like the last homestand that the Bisons are here. There is a chance that they're here August 10th for a 6-game series against Rochester. But beyond that, who knows at this point?
Right. We're going to stay on our toes for sure. And Gregg, before we say goodbye, looking ahead, you did a little bit of that for us just now, talking about potentially moving the club back to Buffalo. There's that trickle-down effect from the big league club, first in AAA, and then, of course, Advanced A Vancouver, very much trying to get back to the Nat in Vancouver before the season is over. And it seems to be a matter of when, not if at this point, though certainly not going to try and play a provincial government master of any sort because we just take it as it comes. But looking ahead, what do the Bisons need to do to continue their success? It's a stretch of the schedule where you avoid Scranton, Wilkes-Barre for the most part, taking on teams you've had a lot of success against, including Lehigh Valley, Rochester, Syracuse. These are games that need to be won if you're going to continue to be at the top of that division. So where do you feel as though this club is right now, 12 games above 500?
I think they're headed in the right direction. I've said for weeks, as long as they don't have a letdown series against the Syracuse or a Rochester when they go on the road, I think they'll be fine. I think looking ahead, you still have a couple of weeks before you see Worcester and Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. So as long as they don't look too far ahead, they'll be fine because they're doing everything right. And right now they've got this surplus of talent, a surplus of arms in the bullpen. They're carrying about 20 pitchers. So starters right now are basically going 5. The bullpen covers the last 4 innings. And based on the guys that they have, and I mentioned the guys with big league experience this year that have been brought down, it's almost an embarrassment of riches where guys like Kirby Sneed, Hobie Harris, your shutdown guys are now part of this every 2 or 3 day rotation where they're finally getting their innings in. So I think the only thing it affects is the pitchers. I think as long as those guys don't get interrupted by not pitching every other day, they'll be all right because the talent that they have in the bullpen, it's pretty serious right now.
Triple G, Gregg Caserta, voice of the Trenton-Buffalo Thunder Bisons. As always, Gregg, thank you for joining us. And before we say goodbye, as always, where can our listeners find you and find the broadcast to tune into some AAA Blue Jays baseball?
So it's 920 ESPN New Jersey, and we've got all the home games streaming on there. They've got a great app. Obviously, you could go to buffalobisons.com or trentonthunder.com. You've got plenty of info on both sites. And again, my thanks to the guys in Buffalo. Pat Malacaro, Brad Bisping have been great to work with all year, and it's been a really nice partnership with them.
As always, Gregg, thank you very much. Cheers to a great game tonight. Be of good voice. And you know what? We'll let you wear your concert tee next week. So if you want to ditch the polo and get back to your vintage rock and roll shirts, why not? You're the sartorialist. So thanks as always.
I will have a surprise for you next week, Zick. I promise.
Cheers to Gregg. Thank you very much. We'll stick in the upper minors, bring in the lieutenant himself, Tyler Murray from AA New Hampshire LT. Great to see you back on the nest as the intern Nathan Strauss has been booted from duty. Always good to see the guy at the top, the vice president of marketing and communications for the New Hampshire Fisher Cats. Tyler, hi.
Hello. We had another battle royale to see who would get the privilege of being on with you, and I finally won. So glad to be here, Zick. Thank you.
The Fisher Cats, certainly with some ups and a little bit of downs. Nice to be getting in some full games, having been washed away for the previous 2 weeks prior to this one. So from your 30,000-foot view, as you always like to start, how have our Fisher Kitties been doing?
Yeah, they're turning things on. They're finding ways to win late. They were finding ways to give games away in late games early in the season. Right now they're in Hartford. Actually just got back from the first 3 games there. It was 2 come from behind wins, including one after a 91-minute rain delay because of 2 Vinny Capra 2-run homers. Story of the season so far, Vinny Capra. Last night they couldn't quite come back, but it's a Yard Goats team that's 19-42 now. So it's a team they should be beating, and they have so far 2 out of 3. So things are kind of trending in the direction I think we expected. This team is great at offense. Half of their wins this year have come with double-digit runs, and it shows. If you get decent enough pitching, which they have lately, it's a really hard team to beat.
Simeon Woods Richardson, great start to the year. Things have not necessarily been going his way of late, and certainly a guy who has not been entirely focused on life in AA because he's been asked to be a part of Team USA. And when you're as good as he is, there are some other external requirements that his attention has to go to. So what have you seen from Simeon? Has it been some bad luck? Has there been a little bit of an ebb in his performance? What are some of the things that maybe are contributing to some of his recent struggles on the mound?
He answered a lot of questions last night, Zick. He had given up 6 runs in 3 consecutive starts. It was 6 earned runs twice and then 4 earned runs on the other occasion. And the walks were a huge issue. He had 7 walks in one game, and he did have 5 last night, but he also wound up with a career high matching 9 strikeouts. And what I was impressed with is he was throwing about a 2-hitter through 4 2/3, but a couple of runners got on base. He was at 96 pitches. With a top prospect like that, you're not going to take your chances. But even with Cesar Martin, the manager, on the mound, he was still pleading with his skipper to stay in the game. This is the last game, the last day, in fact, before he travels to North Carolina for Olympic training camp. So you're right to say that he probably has his mind elsewhere, maybe Tokyo, or at least so I thought. But he was really trying to stay out there just to get one more out in a game that was tied at the time. So I was impressed by that. The competitiveness showed, and he's going to be just fine. It was for me, after seeing him last night, just a small bump in the road, those 3 rough starts in a row.
Before we wrap it up with you, Tyler, and talk a little bit about the Vancouver Canadians, can you tell us about maybe somebody who's not been getting a lot of attention, whether it's from around the league or here on Around the Nest, who is a member of the Fisher Cats, whether it's a hitter or a pitcher, and somebody who maybe we need to be starting to pay more attention to? Of course, Vinny Capra has been the story, but we've talked a lot about Vinny along the way. So is there anybody else, maybe a diamond in the rough, to borrow that tired cliche?
Well, it's been interesting because we've seen some big name prospects live up to the hype, but also some smaller name prospects take this team by storm and the league by storm. But the top 2 guys in that department, Gabriel Moreno and Samad Taylor, are on the injured list right now. So I've actually been encouraged by Jordan Grosjean's last few at-bats. He was always solid, good on-base guy, 5 home runs. Maybe we thought a little more power, but this week his opposite fields gap finding has been really impressive. So he continues to excel there, being able to hit it to all fields. And then one of your old pals, Tanner Kirwer, from High A Vancouver, his speed is just outrageous. We had talked about the pickoff rule where you have to fully step off the rubber in High A, which is no longer. We thought that was a big reason for the big stolen base numbers. He had 25 in the first couple of months, but no, it's all legit. He's aggressive, he's fast, quick twitch, quick speed. Tanner Kirwer is a problem for opposing defenses. He's been fun to watch.
Certainly missed that guy for Vancouver, and always love to see it when Kirwer trots down to first with that protective mitt in his back pocket, because he's going to put it on. You know he's going to be hustling around those base paths. Tyler, before we move down the ladder to High A and talk about the season, what's been going on with the Vancouver Canadians of late, you had a special guest on your broadcast the other day in Hartford at Dunkin' Donuts Park, somebody that Blue Jays fans have known for a long, long time. Tell us who your special guest was.
Yes, it was Mike Wilner, longtime radio broadcaster, pre and post, and then play-by-play for the Blue Jays the last couple of years. He was in town to do Team Israel's Olympic exhibition game, so that was really cool. And when we found the great news that Gregg Caserta went to the big leagues for a couple of games, I said, man, that sounds pretty cool, but Gregg's really good. It kind of sounds pretty hard to make it to the show, so why don't I bring the show to me? So I had Mike come on, and he was awesome. I mean, one of the talents that he brings that I think we take for granted is just the banter and the ability to play off any innocuous thing I say and tie it back into either another good quip or a reference to baseball history. It's really a talent, and is a guy who's a lot of fun to do a game with.
Tyler, we'll keep the banter back and forth between you and I as I pass the torch to you. It's nice to have you back for a number of reasons, but at the end of last week's episode, I was the only one left standing after we let everybody go, given their updates, and pretty much gave one long stream of consciousness update about the Canadians. But so good to have you back. So any chance we can play a little pickleball back and forth here about the Canadians as I give the Vancouver update?
No, please do. I want to start with just a weekly recap because it was a slow start, very beginning of the year, then red hot. And right now I'm wondering where the seas have settled a bit toward the midway point.
Yeah, it's a middling club right now, one game below 500 after back-to-back losses to Hillsborough on Wednesday and then yesterday as well. On Wednesday night, it was a 2-0 shutout loss as Brandon fought for Hillsborough through just the third complete game shutout in Hops franchise history and the first since that first year of the franchise in 2013. So you have to tip your cap to that. And then yesterday, Nick Fraze returning from the injured list for the first time in over a month. Really great to get the former Texas State star back out there. And he proved he had been chomping at the bit to get back to work after some arm issues had sidelined him and put him on the IL as of June, let's call it June 10th or so, and was activated prior to his start yesterday. 2 scoreless innings, nearly had an immaculate inning to get it started. Back-to-back 3-pitch strikeouts and was ahead of that third batter before a ground out and didn't quite get it in 9 pitches, but really looked fantastic. And then it turned into a bullpen game and things got a little bit out of hand. Though the story last night, Ronnie Brito, who was the big return from the Dodgers in that Russell Martin trade, once a top 30 Dodgers prospect. And there's really no way to slice it other than he has been struggling since he joined the Jays system. The first Canadian with 2 home runs in a game. He had a pair of 2-run homers last night to keep the game close, though the C's lost 7-4. And for Brito, if he can find a way to get it going, this is going to be a guy in the lower parts of the lineup that can do a lot of damage. As we've seen, the top 5 hitters in the order pretty much be set between Rafael Antigua, Tanner Morris, Sebastian Espino, Luis de los Santos, Ryan Gold, and Spencer Horwitz. That's pretty much your 1 through 6. And going back to one of Gregg's conversation pieces was that Rafael Antigua, a guy who profiles as an infielder, has been playing a lot of outfield of late because Cameron Eden has been on the injured list with a hamstring issue. He was supposed to start last night coming off the IL to be the DH, but at the last minute he was scratched. So newcomer Zach Cook, recently promoted from low A Dunedin, and we can certainly get Andrew Thriffiley's thoughts on Cook and the rest of the DJs once we get to AT. But certainly disappointing to see Cameron not be able to return. He was certainly the Robin to Tanner Kirwer's Batman, and sometimes those roles would be reversed. But with those 2 guys in the order through that hot stretch at the beginning of the year, the Kirwer-Eden combo was relentless on the bases, in the outfield, and at the dish. So when Cameron Eden comes back, that certainly will be a treat. Still working back is Will Robertson, a top prospect for the Blue Jays who was sidelined with a wrist fracture in early May. He just started his rehab back in Florida, so there's a great chance that we can get that horse back in the barn along the way. So this is a team that's banged up a little bit, but split a series with Spokane, 3 games, 3 wins, 3 losses last week, and trending upward still, despite the fact that they're a game under 500. And at the moment, if I can do some mental math, about 6.5 games back of a playoff spot going into tonight's game 4 against the Hops.
It's a different organizational ladder this year for every team, obviously, with 4 affiliates. I've been curious what the jump has been like, in your view, from guys going from low A to high A. Sometimes it's short season A to full season A, advanced A, double A. It's different now, though. So with the newcomers coming in to replace some of the guys who mentioned, like Tanner Kirwer, who's done really well in New Hampshire, how have the new guys done in their first couple of weeks with the C's?
I think the pitchers have performed better than the hitters. First that comes to mind is Eric Rivera, who hit north of 470 with the DJs through the first 2 weeks of the season, came up to Vancouver and was 0 for his first 32, but has continued to be a steady presence at the bottom of the order. He had the game-winning RBI on Tuesday night. That was with 2 outs and a couple of men on in the 8th with the game tied 2-2. He jumps on the first pitch and singles into center field and has continued to build his average. He's just under 200, but when you go 0 for 32 for your first few, let's call it first 3 weeks in the league, that's obviously going to put you at a relatively disadvantageous position to try and hit north of the Mendoza line, but Eric is on his way. On the pitching side, Rothier and Adrian and Adrian Hernandez, guys who dominated in low A, have continued to dominate up here in high A. Rothier has yet to allow an earned run through 5 relief outings, and Adrian Hernandez, 5 strikeouts through 3 innings pitched the other night, as he continues to dominate high A West opposition with that changeup that, in my opinion, and I think Andrew could testify to this as well, that is a big league ready changeup that major league hitters would have trouble dealing with right now today. And Adrian's just 21 years old, so continuing his development as well. Zach Cook making that late start yesterday, making his second appearance in high A, certainly pressed into perhaps some early action, especially a guy who was drafted just last year out of the University of Texas at Arlington. So still getting his feet wet as a professional, but I think the learning curve has been less steep for the pitchers coming up from low A as opposed to the hitters. And I've said it on our broadcast a few times along the way. It's just a unique year after the layoff plus the minor league restructuring. guys who might be in short season or in low A coming out of college or coming out of being signed as a free agent are now being thrust into high A action. And so it changes the tenor and the vibe a little bit of some of these guys in the clubhouse. But that being said, everybody's pulling on the same side of the rope, and we're seeing development where we need to.
It's especially interesting in the high A West with 6 teams and a championship series this year. So there are only, 4 other teams you need to beat in the standings to make it to that championship round. What does the upcoming second half of the season look like for Vancouver, and how high are your hopes for a postseason run?
Well, it's putting my English degree to good use. It's the best of times and the worst of times for Vancouver, a little tale of two cities for them, simply because they don't control their destiny against one of those clubs at the top of the circuit. That's Eugene. They've already played their 12 scheduled games against the Emeralds this year. And as it stands, the Emeralds are in that second place position. So if the season ended today, it would be Eugene taking on the Everett Aqua Sox. Vancouver, they were really taken to task against the Sox a couple of weeks ago. I joined us on the nest and was feeling rather despondent after a rough series at Funko Field in Northern Washington. But after 18 games against the Frogs, there are 18 more over the remainder of the second half. So an opportunity for Vancouver to do some serious damage. And the hope is that the Mariners promote some of those guys at Advanced A and take them up to Double A Arkansas, because for me, that Aqua Sox team is a Double A club right now. They're all over the league leaderboard. They are extremely talented, which we know was going to be the case from the start of the year. But it's time for some of those guys to get out of the High A West. And let's make this a little bit more equitable. We'd love parity, whether it's in the NBA, MLB, or MILB. We would love to see, especially in a 6-team league, things tighten up a little bit as we make our way into the second half of July here. And then, of course, the dog days of August and September.
Well, hopefully no former Eastern League broadcasters are tuning in to us asking for parity in a minor league level after 2018. I mean, there was no parity to be seen.
Well, it's great when you're on one side of it, but when you're on the wrong side of it, c'est la vie. And LT, as always, really appreciate the assist here, making sure that I don't have to really lose my breath. And I know you've got an interview coming up in 5 minutes, so if you need to say goodbye and we get down to our friend Andrew Thriffiley with Lowe Dunedin, I can handle that on my own, unless you'd love to hang, but we would love to say goodbye and thanks to you if you have other duties.
All day AT, my guy. Have a great segment. I'll be tuned in later. Zick, Leo, thank you guys for the time. We'll see you soon.
Cheers to Tyler Murray. Remember, it's nhfishercats.com. Check in with everything Fisher Cats baseball. And certainly we are watching action in the Double-A Northeast. All right, AT, it's your turn, my friend. Lowe Dunedin, give us the updates from the DJs. Always great to have you on board. And we've been watching the standings as well as the box scores every night. There's been ups, there's been downs, and there's been some side-to-sides as well for Dunedin.
Yeah, we got past that Tarpon series, won 2 of them. So that was always good to see. Those game 2s are our thing. So good to win those. They started to lose some prospects with Anthony Volpe going up and Canadian Sanford going up as well. So I think, like you're talking about, I hope to get some of that parity back into the league because we kind of feel like now that some of those players are gone and some of the teams are starting to move up, we're going to start taking our chances to win some games, as you saw at the beginning of this series. Might have lost last night, but we feel like we're in a good spot right now, for sure.
Let's talk about one of the most interesting men in the system, at least based on name and hometown, Sem Robberse, although I'm still probably butchering his last name. But talk to us a little bit about Sem and what we can expect going forward. Clearly, he has been able to succeed at the level. Who knows how much longer he'll be in low A before he gets that promotion, because, of course, as a pitcher, there is always room for growth and opportunity to make that jump a little bit more quickly than a hitter might be able to do so. I know there was the other night when he took the loss after a relatively rough outing, but overall, what are some things that make Sem Sem?
Yeah, he just likes to compete. He's 19 years old, so we'll see if he stays the whole year or not. Maybe gets a last month chance to come up and help you guys out. But he likes to compete. His outing against Tampa, his first 2 innings were great. Started to lose a little bit towards that 3rd inning and got hit around a little bit. Pitched last night, again, good in the first part and the first 2 innings, and just got dinked and dunked last night. Had 2 PFPs to start the game, and then a couple more hit right back at him that he had to make plays on. And one play just didn't go his way. And then after that error, kind of leads to a couple more runs. So that's tough to see. But again, just a guy that likes to compete, go out there every 5th day, give his best. And he's been successful for the most part this season. Going to see how he grows with the outings where he hasn't been elite. As a 19-year-old, it can be a little tough to get over that hump of not dominating every single start. But I think he's going to realize that he's built for this league and he's going to hopefully get moved up.
It's time for our weekly O update. We might have actually skipped it last week, just given the nature of last week's episode with our special guest, as well as just some lengthy updates from up and down the system. So we might have missed out on that O update last week, but what's our friend Orelvis up to?
We got a good one this week because Monday he had a home run in his last at bat to finish the night in Clearwater and end up winning 9-1. And then the next day, his next two at bats also home runs. So he has a 2 home run game on Wednesday. Great start, goes 4 hits that night. His third hit of that night was off the top of the wall in left field. So we almost had a 3 home run game in that night. But yeah, just hitting well. This month he's hitting .333, so that's always good to see. 5 home runs when he had 6 the past 2 months before this. A 1.19 OPS. So I mean, he is just firing on all cylinders right now. It's great to see. And his good friend right in front of him in the lineup, Miguel Geraldo, also hit a home run that same night on Wednesday. So hopefully those two together can start to figure it out, because when those two are playing well together, it's an exciting thing to watch when they're having fun.
I'm going to throw you a curveball here. And as always, curious to know if there's anybody we have yet to touch on, or somebody perhaps who might have had some standout performances or showing some growth. Maybe the numbers don't tell the whole story, but someone who's been putting together better at bats or seems to be challenging opposing hitters in a different way. Is there anybody that stands out to you that deserves a little bit of love here on the Nest?
Yeah, you got to give love to Steward Berroa on the base paths. He's a great defender, first off in the outfield. Not a prospect, obviously, but he's stolen 17 bases this season, and we're second in the league in stolen bases with 19. So that's great to see. And him and Desan Brown in the dugout are great, feeding off of each other, talking about how to steal bases and what they see. So that's good to see. Trent Palmer, his last 2 outings, he's gone 3 innings, his last 2 starts, hasn't given up an earned run, only 1 hit in his last 2 outings. So he's really coming back from an injury to start the season from spring training. So drafted him in 2020. So to see him do well is great to see. And then we have a guy, Thomas Ruwe, out of the pen. He started the year with us, didn't do too great to start the year, if we're being honest with ourselves. Then he took some time away, went back to extended, then went into the complex league, came back on June 25th. Since June 25th, he's pitched 8 innings, has a 0.38 whip, a 0.071 opponent batting average, and he's only given up 1 earned run in 8 outings. So it's great to see. Another one of those guy bullpen arms that we seem to just keep churning out, and who knows how long he'll be here.
I got to say, Andrew, I think every week you lead the Nest in the ability to pull out those terrific stats and talk about a number of different players on the mound or at the dish about what they've been able to do statistically. So I don't want to pull the curtain from the Wizard of Oz here, but do you have the stats in front of you? Do you keep it nearby, or do you just do some prep work, or are you the Rain Man of baseball stats?
No, you got to have something around you to keep you, to give you something to talk about, because you can see it. But I feel like, since obviously we don't have a broadcast and we don't have that TV, it's good to give the fans something that they can feel tangible about, rather than me just saying how great they are, because I mean, I'm around them every day. So they're all great people and they're great guys to be with, but to give those tangible stats of how good these guys actually are, hopefully helps.
AT, as always, my friend, thanks for the terrific updates. And next week, we're going to have our midseason award show. So as we talked about in our email thread, I know you'll be ready to go with all the stats, all the insights, and so much more, talking about Low-A Dunedin. And always a pleasure to have you on board, my friend, talking about some DJs baseball and also just life in the Low-A Southeast. So as always, Andrew, thanks for being a part of the Nest today.
Great to be here. Always fun.
Andrew Thriffiley, Low-A Dunedin, and that's it for another edition of Around the Nest. Of course, if you found us, you probably know where to find us, but tell your friends, tell your frenemies, tell your family, and everybody else who might have some interest in some Blue Jays minor league talk. We'll be back with another fresh edition of Around the Nest 2.0 next Friday. But for now, my entire co-hosts included Gregg Caserta, Tyler Murray, Andrew Thriffiley, and our producer, Leo Mui. I'm Tyler Zickel, signing out and saying we'll see you next time on Around the Nest.